So I'm basically doubling the dose from, let's say, 493 milligrams to 1020 milligrams per week. A significant increase, but it's only going to be for 8 weeks, after which I will cruise again, because now that I'm getting close to my birthday, I have a little bit of a goal to look my best shape I can be at 39. Vigorous Steve here with, you guessed it, some more blood work results. We're going to review the results from last weekend, being week 8 of the cycle. It took a little while to get those results back because I also checked my cystatin and C levels. Those are outsourced, so I got them back this morning, nicely in the middle of the reference range. I wanted to compare cystatin C to 4 weeks ago to this weekend, being week 8 of the cycle. So we're going to compare week 8 to the results of week 6, where I made the last adjustments 2 weeks ago, as well as some of the results from week 4, being 4 weeks ago. So, long story short, this is the cycle that I adjusted 2 weeks ago at week 6 of the cycle. I increased the DHEA from 25 milligrams to 37.5 milligrams per day. I reintroduced the Turkesterone and Ecdysterone to complete this SHBG experiment. So I used Turkesterone and Ecdysterone for the first 4 weeks of my cycle. Then I removed it for 2 weeks to see how my SHBG levels would decline. And now I reintroduced them the last 2 weeks. I will give you my final say somewhere during this video. After the previous blood work video, I decided to do a deload as well as a fast to catch up a little bit on recovery and speed up the fat loss process. Since I'm using thyroid medication, I decided to add in the liraglutide at 0.6 milligrams per day to blunt my appetite while fasting. Now, the last week I didn't fast, but I continued with the liraglutide and will probably continue using that going forward to help keep my mind off food so I can focus on work. So there's 0.6 milligrams liraglutide in the picture right now from Monday to Saturday. I don't use it on Sunday because I go out for lunch or 3 with my wife on Sunday, and I don't want this appetite blunting effect that the liraglutide has. I stopped the TB500 because my shoulder is feeling a lot better, so I used 10 milligrams or 1 vial of TB500 injected directly into the left deltoid. The inflammation there is gone and the mobility is a lot better now, so I don't feel the need to continue using TB500 for the foreseeable future. Now, on the previous results of 2 weeks ago, my high sensitivity C-reactive protein readings were still too high, at least too high for me because I want to keep my inflammatory markers as low as possible. My AHS CRP levels were 3.8 milligrams per liter, so I decided to discontinue the aminoasylum Stampede as well as the MOTS-C. The reason why I stopped those 2 compounds is because I get a little bit of post-injection pain from the Stampede containing carnitine, injectable ATP, as well as injectable AMP. And I was also getting pretty bad post-injection pain of the MOTS-C to the point I was getting pretty big welts. I was doing the MOTS-C subcutaneously, and when you go read online on Reddit or some of the other user reports of people using MOTS-C, that seems to be a common occurrence. And in the beginning of using MOTS-C at 5 milligrams on Monday and Friday, I didn't experience that at all. The injections were smooth, no post-injection pain, no welts, no redness, or no allergic response. But as I kept using the MOTS-C, these welts and bumps were getting worse and worse and worse. So I decided to take 2 weeks off from that as well because I wasn't sure how much of an overlap the MOTS-C was having on my C-reactive protein readings alongside the Stampede from Aminoasylum and the underground lab nandrolone decanoate that I was running, which I didn't discontinue because my training partner, Aaron Burke, is using several milliliters of this underground lab. He's using tespropionate, trenbolone acetate, and testosterone enanthate as well as primabol. And basically the whole contest prep that he's running is with this underground lab, which produces its products with Migliol 840 as well as ethyl oleate. And his high sensitivity C-reactive protein readings were only 0.5 to 0.8 milligrams per liter. So I suspected that some of my inflammatory markers went up either due to the MOTS-C or due to the injectable ATP formulation. I decided to take those out. Now my inflammatory markers are still somewhat elevated. I'm using only 0.2 milliliters underground lab nandrolone decanoate because I'm using 50 milligrams per week, a very small amount. And my CRP levels are still higher than I would like them. So I'm going to take this underground lab out. Again, individual response to these synthetic carrier oils is also very important. That's why I keep checking my C-reactive protein readings as this cycle continues. I mean, I'm always very on top of my inflammatory markers, and if I see them over 1 milligram per liter, I'm going to make some changes. So I reintroduced the MOD-C, albeit with intramuscular injections. I'm going to do my blood work again 2 weeks from now, see where my inflammatory markers are at, and then decide if I need to make further adjustments, maybe remove the MOD-C, or if I'm allowed to reintroduce this injectable ATP, which I certainly do enjoy. And I also removed the nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide plus, the NAD plus, from my monthly antioxidant intravenous cocktail. So now I'm just using weekly 1800 milligrams glutathione, 5000 milligrams vitamin C, and a B100 complex formula in my weekly IV administrations. That's enough antioxidants for me, and I didn't really notice an additional benefit from using NAD plus on top of the nicotinamide mononucleotide. Nicotinamide mononucleotide in combination with MODS-C, so that's daily 250 milligrams to 500 milligrams NMN and biweekly administrations of 5 milligrams MODS-C, that gives me a surplus of energy. And doing monthly NAD plus 250 milligrams per administration, I didn't notice a difference. Now before, I used NAD plus weekly instead of the NMN, but NMN is significantly cheaper when you break it down on a daily expense basis. So I'm going to take the NAD plus out. I didn't notice that much of a benefit beyond the MOD-C and the NMN, which I'm already doing. And since I'm getting such good results from the MOD-C and NMN in combination, I don't feel the reason to switch NMN to nicotinamide riboside. That's NR. So maybe I will run that experiment in the future. I know a lot of you guys have asked for it, but the way I feel right now, MOD-C plus NMN, that's a winning formula. I don't feel the need to add NAD plus on top of that, and I don't feel the reason to switch to NR in the near future. And the rest of the protocol has stayed pretty much the same. I'm still using a low dose of modafinil, clenbuterol, T3, as well as ribosine, and inject my carnitine twice per day before fasted cardio and before the workout. Ancillaries have stayed the same: nebivolol, ezetimibe, and telmisartan. That hasn't changed. And let's quickly go over the progress pictures. The last progress pictures that I took were right after the fast, on the 5th day, after which I decided to call it quits because I was really hungry on this fast. Fasting using 25 micrograms of T3 per day, I can't recommend it, even if you're using 0.6 milligrams liraglutide or another GLP-1 receptor agonist to blunt your appetite. It felt like my stomach was eating itself from the inside out. And I was doing a fasting mimicking diet, so I would eat a salad bowl maybe 2 or 3 times per day to have some sort of fiber and stuff in my stomach to keep my appetite suppressed and help with detoxification of the bile acids, clean the intestinal tract from the inside out. Still, 25 micrograms of T3 while fasting, I can't recommend it. I was starving. So after 4 days, I decided to call it quits. I wanted to go to 5 days, but I couldn't last that long. I dropped 6 kilos on the scale, so that's about 12, 13 pounds, give or take. I went from 104.5 to 98.5 kilograms, which is the fastest weight loss I've ever had while fasting. So again, don't do what I do. I probably will never do a fast on T3 again, unless I really make a dose of liraglutide, which always makes you a little bit nauseous. So I'm probably just fast without the T3 and without the liraglutide, getting into a nice state of ketosis, which blunts the appetite sufficiently as well. So the before and after pictures are, well, quite good for a 4-day transformation. I'm going to use these progress pictures as the new baseline, which I want to improve upon 4 weeks from now when I do blood work again at the end of August or beginning of September, depending on what day the Sunday falls on to. Then after this very short 4-day fasting mimicking diet, I went back to my regular good old diet consisting of 2,500 to 2,600 poverty calories. The diet hasn't really changed since the beginning of this cycle. So for the last 8 weeks, minus those 4 days of fasting mimicking, I followed the exact same diet. It's on the screen. I wouldn't recommend people to follow this right off the start. Again, I'm relying on muscle memory. And, well, my PED stack is quite extensive, so I don't expect too much metabolic slowdown. starting off this low on caloric intake. The nutrition is on point. The micronutrients are still in a surplus. So I can do this for the next foreseeable 8 weeks or so. Let's review the blood work results. My urinalysis is pretty much the same as last time. The appearance was clear. The specific gravity was 1.004, indicating sufficient hydration. And the pH of my urine was 6. Everything else appears to be normal. On the complete blood count, comparing week 4 to week 8, being this weekend, my total white blood cell count increased with 8.4% from 5,100 to 5,530 cells per cubic millimeter. And you can see that on my white blood cell differential, my neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, and basophils are back into normal levels. The eosinophils are still slightly elevated towards the top of the reference range at 5% of the white blood cell differential. On my previous results 4 weeks ago, my monocytes and eosinophils were significantly off. 10 on the monocytes and 8 on the eosinophils. So again, doing more frequent injections 4 weeks ago and removing several of the compounds have improved my white blood cell count and white blood cell differential. Now, reintroducing a couple compounds might offset this again. The more frequent injections you do, the more offsetting or off-putting it can be on your white blood cell count. So again, I will keep my eye on it going forward. And if I see my monocytes or eosinophils increase again, I will have to remove the compounds which are not pharmaceutical grade. Hemoglobin increased with 9.5% from 15.8 to 17.3 grams per deciliter. Hematocrit increased with 8.3% from 48 to 52%. In the end, it should be your blood work results which determine whether you need to donate blood or not. And if you suffer from sleep apnea because you have a very large stature or thick neck, and you're using erythropoietic compounds like anadrol, boldenone, primobolan, or EPO, no amount of telmisartan is going to save you from high hematocrit. So again, do your blood work to see if you need to donate or not. If you're using telmisartan, it doesn't magically exclude you from doing blood donations or therapeutic phlebotomies. Now, in my case, I'm at 52% in a sufficiently hydrated state. My calcium score is 0. I'm taking fish oil on a daily basis, as well as vitamin E, easy to pass through the arteries because I'm also taking magnesium. I feel comfortable with a hematocrit up to 54%, after which I would consider to donate. Now, depending on how much PEDs I take and whether I develop sleep apnea magically, which I don't even snore, at a body weight of 255 pounds, I'm around 102 kilos, so that's 230 pounds right now. So right now, my hematocrit is good for performance, but not alarmingly high to the point that I need to do a therapeutic phlebotomy. My red blood cell count came up with 11.2% from 4.83 to 5.37 million cells per cubic millimeter. Mean corpulus volume, mean corpulus hemoglobin concentration stayed pretty much the same as 4 weeks ago. And like I expected, my red cell distribution width came down with 6.4% from 14.1 to 13.2%. And it's because I've been on cycle now for longer, using the exact same dose of testosterone and primobolan and anavar, which of course all combined being about 500 milligrams per week, which will of course increase red blood cell production. And now that I've been on cycle for 56 days, 8 weeks, the amount of red blood cells which were produced before this cycle are slowly starting to die off. Again, red blood cells have an active life of about 90 to 100 days, sometimes 120 days. So as these old red blood cells start to recycle and get destroyed through autophagy, the new red blood cells and the overall shape and the percentage of the red cell distribution width gets more homogeneous. So I think with another 8 weeks on a cycle, my red cell distribution width will be about 12 to 13%. And my total platelet count came down with 8.1% from 258,000 to 237,000 cells per cubic millimeter. Was my platelet count slightly higher than average because I had Flurona 8 weeks ago? That could be the case. Or it could be a normal fluctuation because usually my platelet count is around 225 to 250,000 cells per cubic millimeter. So again, not too much deviation there. Blood glucose is pretty much the same from 80 to 83 milligrams per deciliter. Blood urea nitrogen from 20.1 to 23.1 milligrams per deciliter. So even though my overall caloric intake and protein intake hasn't really changed. My blood urea nitrogen still came up with 14.9%. Could be a hydration issue. Could be that my protein metabolism has increased because I'm on thyroid medication for longer, or maybe because I did a fast. But usually, I will say this, my blood urea nitrogen really comes down to the single digits when I do a fast. So I'm not entirely sure why my BUN levels have increased over these last 4 weeks when my diet hasn't really changed. My creatinine has come up with 2.3% from 1.29 to 1.32 milligrams per deciliter. And my cystatin C has also come up with 5.1% from 0.78 to 0.82 milligrams per liter. Now, cystatin C is still nicely within the reference range, so is blood urea nitrogen, but my creatinine is slightly over the reference range. Now, when I look at my previous results of having creatinine of 1.5, 1.75, 1.92 milligrams per deciliter with normal cystatin C levels, I think that my creatinine is just slowly coming up because my muscularity is returning, and so is my training intensity, even though I try to keep some reps in reserve. Now that I'm back on the PED train, the training intensity has increased quite substantially. I still try to keep reps in reserve on most sets, but I think I take about 2 or 3 sets per workout to failure. Maybe that's the reason why my creatinine has increased slightly. Uric acid is still comparable, even though it came down with 9.8% from 5.1 to 4.6 milligrams per deciliter. Creatine phosphokinase has come down with 10.6%, 2,875 to 2,570 units per liter. So that's a reduction of, 11% because I fasted for 4 days and took a week off from the gym, in which case CPK levels come down quite substantially. But because I went back to the gym, training balls to the wall with reps in reserve, I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I still train hard, or at least as hard as my recovery capability allows me to. CPK probably went down after this 4-day fast and 1 week deload and then came back up. So they might continue to increase further in the future, where my CPK levels might end up at 3,500 units per liter or maybe even more. Comparing C-reactive protein to 2 weeks ago, where it was 3.8 milligrams per liter, now it's 1.3 milligrams per liter. So that's a significant reduction of 66%. Still, it's a higher CRP level than I'm willing to have for longer periods of time. So what I'm going to do, what I already alluded to, I'm going to remove the underground lab decadurabolin because I do feel that I'm not responding well to the Migliol 840 and ethyl oleates, simply because I get a little bit of post-injection pain and irritation at the subcutaneous site of administration. And even though I'm injecting 0.2 milliliters per week, it's probably 0.2 milliliters too much. So I'm going to take the decadurabolin out and switch to homebrew. Don't ask Chase Irons. He's the homebrew king. Going to switch from underground lab decadurabolin to homebrew decadurabolin at the same concentration, 250 milligrams per 1 milliliter, albeit that this homebrew is going to be in grapeseed oil, and fingers crossed, my inflammatory markers come down further, even though I'm reintroducing the MOD-C at 5 milligrams twice per week, which will be intramuscular administrations. I'm leaving the injectable ATP out for now because I do want to have a firm grasp on my inflammatory markers going forward. I will leave out the curcumin supplementation, of course, because I don't want to have a false reduction due to curcumin supplementation, after which my CRP will probably be 0.5 to 0.8 or maybe 1 milligram per liter, but I want to keep my eye on it without the curcumin. I didn't recheck my D-dimer levels. I don't think that was necessary. Cholesterol, comparing week 6, 2 weeks ago to now, total cholesterol came up with 2% from 107 to 109 milligrams per deciliter. Triglycerides pretty much the same, 28 to 27 milligrams per deciliter. And funnily enough, my high-density lipoprotein is actually coming up. At week 4, I was at 28 milligrams per deciliter. Week 6, 32 milligrams per deciliter. And now, last weekend, week 8, 35 milligrams per deciliter, which is an increase of 9.4% compared to 2 weeks ago. So slowly but steadily, my HDL is coming up. I think it's because I reintroduced citrus bergamot at week 4 at 1,000 milligrams per day, 500 milligrams citrus bergamot in the morning and 500 milligrams in the evening. When you look at my LDL, it went from 56 to 67 to 64. So compared to 2 weeks ago, it came down with 4.5%. I think the ultimate goal is to keep my HDL around 35 to 40 milligrams per deciliter. Whether that's going to happen over the next 8 weeks, I'm not entirely sure. As long as I keep my HDL around 64, 70 milligrams per deciliter, I'm going to be happy. Again, keep in mind that the citrus bergamot has a positive effect on my lipids. So does the fish oil. So does the daily fasted cardio. So does the ketogenic diet with healthy fat sources. Of course, the ezetimibe is taking my total cholesterol down. So does the thyroid medication that actually brings the total cholesterol, the HDL and the LDL down. So there's a lot of things that influence the lipid levels, as well as the injection frequency and how much your testosterone is converting into estradiol, and whether you're taking Primabol and Anavar on top, which again, all of these compounds have an effect on your lipid panel. So all things considering, I would say that my lipid panel is quite good, but I would like to see my HDL a little bit higher. Will that happen? I'm not entirely sure. Stay tuned for the blood work again in a month or so. Liver function. I didn't do a full panel because up until now, the only things that really change are my liver enzymes, the AST and the ALT. Those have been steadily increasing. Is that due to the stack that I'm on? I'm pretty sure that it is. Is it due to increasing the training intensity? I'm pretty sure that's also contributing. So we went from, on the AST, from 50 to 55 to 62 units per liter. So that's week 4 to week 6 to week 8. And the ALT went from 44 to 48 to 51 units per liter. So comparing week 6 to week 8, AST increased with 12.7% and ALT increased with 6.3%. Ferritin came down with 39.4% from 274 to 166 nanograms per milliliter. Could be because my inflammatory markers came down. Could be because some of the iron is now being used to produce more red blood cells and is no longer stored in the ferritin. Even though I increased my beef intake, ferritin came down, but my serum iron, the free iron in the bloodstream, increased with 34.5% from 58, which was subclinical, to 78 micrograms per deciliter. So I'm going to limit my beef intake again to maybe once or twice per week on a Sunday cheat meal and maybe on Tuesday following a leg day. So instead of having beef 3 or 4 times per week, I'm now going to cut it back to once or twice per week because I feel that my ferritin, iron levels, hematocrits, red blood cell count is totally good at the moment. Now for the cardiac markers, those increased as well. CK-MB, the heart-specific creatine phosphokinase, increased with 21.2% from 18.4 to 22.3 nanograms per milliliter. I didn't recheck my NT-proBNP because all of the results that I've had over the last year after getting vaxxed, my NT-proBNP levels were never off. The last time they were 11.4 picograms per milliliter, which is considered very low. High sensitivity troponin T levels stayed exactly the same, 0.024 nanograms per milliliter over the last 4 weeks. And I also rechecked my troponin I, which is also a heart-specific marker. So you have troponin T and troponin I, both of which are found in skeletal muscle, but generally speaking, they're more indicative of heart functioning. On April 4th, before I started this cycle, when I did the CT angiogram, where I got a calcium score of 0 back, my troponin I levels was 5.1 picograms per milliliter. And since then, it increased with 55% to 7.9 picograms per milliliter, which is considered to be too high. So now that I see that my cardiac markers are still increasing, even though my troponin T levels are staying pretty much the same and are at the lowest point that they have been over the last couple of months, I will decide to take the clenbuterol out and make sure that the next time I check these cardiac markers, I will take a full week off from the gym because I'm not entirely sure if the CK-MB and the troponin T and troponin I levels are actually being increased due to the training intensity. Again, if my training intensity is increasing, then maybe the CK-MB and the troponin T and I levels are also increasing according to the training intensity and the volume and the workload that I'm putting on my body. So again, I have done a CT angiogram in the past showing a normal functioning heart. I've done an MRI, which was before getting vaxxed, showing a normal functioning heart. I've done an ultrasound or an echocardiogram on my heart showing slight left ventricular hypertrophy, but the blood flow through my heart and the oxygen delivery on all of the medical screening that I've done over the years shows that my heart is healthy. So, again, is it due to getting vaxxed a couple months ago? Probably. My mistake, right? Unfortunately, I can't take it back. I can only track these markers going forward. Now that I see that they're going up slightly, clenbuterol's out, and I will take a week off before the next blood work results to see if it's due to training intensity increasing. And again, I'm not entirely sure if it's due to the clen. I'm taking 20 micrograms per day. My heart rate barely budged because I'm also taking 5 milligrams in Nebivolol. Still, might as well take it out, run that experiment, and confirm that with blood work. And to be completely honest with you guys, it's a little bit worrying to see these numbers go up with time. Still, I'm going to go with the results of the CT angiogram and the MRI, which I've done over the last couple of months. And then if I notice anything off, which certainly isn't the case, I mean, my cardiovascular endurance is great. My stamina is great. I don't have any chest pain or any discomfort. These are just numbers on paper. And if I weren't to check my CKMB or troponin T or troponin I levels, I would say that my heart is functioning phenomenally. So no symptoms, just numbers on paper, and the imaging that I've done over the last couple of months say that my heart is perfectly healthy. So could be famous last words, of course. And well, who knows? It could also be the thyroid medication that I'm taking. 25 micrograms of T3 activates the thyroid receptor alpha and beta present on the heart, which could worsen these cardiac markers over time as well. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to switch to Sobatyrone after this 8-week experiment with 25 micrograms T3 over the day. But now that I've decided to take the clenbuterol out, I'm going to keep the T3 medication consistent at 12.5 micrograms twice per day because my thyroid panel actually looks quite okay. I don't feel the need to make an immediate adjustment there. Relying on the clen to get these cardiac markers down, potentially. And if that's not the case, then I can always look into replacing the T3 with 25 to 50 micrograms Sobatyrone, which I already have in stock. But considering that the fat loss and all of my results and the hunger is all manageable and going accordingly, I don't want to make too many adjustments. I will take it step by step, retesting these cardiac markers after 2 weeks without clenbuterol in the picture. My thyroid panel looks quite similar. Total T3, 135 nanograms per deciliter, an increase of 8%. Free T3 went down with 2% from 3.65 to 3.58 picograms per milliliter. Total T4 actually came down quite a lot, 38% from 2.21 to 1.37 micrograms per deciliter, which is even lower, below the reference range that it was last time. Free T3 is now also subclinical from 0.71 to 0.52 nanograms per deciliter. And my thyroid stimulating hormone increased with, 452.4% from 0.42 to 2.32 micro IUs per milliliter. This gives me a reason to believe that the growth hormone is still actively converting T4 into T3. And now that my T4 levels have dropped quite dramatically because I'm not supplementing T4, my thyroid stimulating hormone has gone up, resulting in a slight increase in total T3 levels. Again, because the conversion of T4 into T3 is still occurring due to the exogenous growth hormone that I'm taking, 2 units before bed. So what I will do is probably add in 50 micrograms T4 to keep my total and free T4 levels within the reference range, which over time should reduce my thyroid stimulating hormone levels to, let's say, 1 to 2 micro IUs per milliliter towards the bottom of the reference range, because now there's sufficient amounts of T3 and T4 in the bloodstream. Again, I will run that experiment for 2 weeks and then retest these markers to see if that hypothesis is correct. And then I'm basically on Armour Thyroid twice per day. So that's 12.5 micrograms T3 and 25 micrograms T4 twice per day for a total of 25 micrograms T3 and 50 micrograms T4. And then depending on how these cardiac markers change and how my thyroid panel changes, I might switch to T3 and T4 for Sobatyrone and then see if that has a positive effect on my metabolism and further reduce my cardiac markers if they're being artificially inflated by the thyroid medication. And now we're at the sex hormones. Hit that like button if you use the timestamps to skip ahead. I know that you did. Estradiol has been steadily declining over the last 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago, we were at 48.7 picograms per milliliter. 6 weeks ago, 44 picograms per milliliter. And now, this week, at week 8, only 31 picograms per milliliter. So comparing week 6 to week 8, that's a reduction of 29.5%. Could be due to a couple different things. Could be because I increased the zinc intake, which has some aromatase inhibiting effects from 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams zinc over the last 4 weeks. It could be because my body fat levels are coming down. Again, 4 weeks ago, I was significantly fatter than I am right now. It could be, and you can look at the total testosterone levels, it could be because now finally the testosterone and the primobolan are reaching peak serum concentrations. 4 weeks ago, my total testosterone was 820.03 nanograms per deciliter. And since then, it has increased with 37% to 1123.38 nanograms per deciliter. I have not changed anything to the dose or the injection frequency. I still use about 156 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week with daily subcutaneous microadministrations. But I think that at week 4, serum concentrations were not peaked yet. That's why total testosterone is reasonably low at only 820 nanograms per deciliter for the amount of testosterone that I'm injecting. Now, 4 weeks later, at week 8 of the cycle, I think that my serum testosterone levels have finally peaked at around 1100 nanograms per deciliter, which is where I would expect it to be on 150 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. So that could be the same case for primobolan. If it takes 8 weeks for primobolan to reach peak serum concentrations, because I'm using, almost double the dose of primobolan compared to testosterone, now I'm finally getting its aromatase inhibiting effects. So even though testosterone levels are increasing after 8 weeks of these daily microadministrations, so are my primobolan concentrations, which is now inhibiting the conversion of testosterone into estradiol and reducing serum concentrations there. So I think it's multifactorial. Still, I'm happy with these readings. I mean, an estradiol of 31 is actually quite good. I don't mind it to be at 44 or 48 picograms per milliliter, but since I'm going to make some adjustments to my protocol, I think estradiol might actually increase over the next 4 weeks or so. Still, it could also be because I made some modifications to my DHEA supplementation. I started with 50 milligrams sublingual DHEA, then reduced it to 25 milligrams sublingual DHEA, and now increased it again to 37.5 milligrams DHEA sublingually. So there are some fluctuations there. When you look at my DHEA sulfate levels, on 50 milligrams, I was at 634 micrograms per deciliter. On 25 milligrams, I was at 316 micrograms per deciliter. And now on 37.5 milligrams DHEA per day, I'm on 420 micrograms per deciliter. So from week 6 to week 8, that's an increase of 33%. Actually very similar to the increase of week 4 to week 8 on the total testosterone levels. And now, because I didn't change anything to my pregnenolone supplementation, at week 8, I'm still the same on my progesterone concentrations, 0.15 nanograms per milliliter. So I'm not going to make any changes regarding my pregnenolone supplementation going forward, keeping it at 12.5 milligrams over the day sublingually. I might make some changes to DHEA supplementation because I'm also going to introduce ACG again, because now my stock of ACG, HMG, recombinant LH, Ovitrel, all the fertility medications, I have a significant stock. So now I can actually reintroduce ACG to restore a little bit of testicular function. I didn't recheck my prolactin levels because the last time they were around 7.5 nanograms per milliliter, which is nice in the middle of the reference range. And my libido, to be fair, has been very, very good. So I didn't feel the need to recheck my prolactin levels. So again, my total testosterone levels came up, my estradiol levels came down, but my SHBG increased with 23.1% from 10.4 nanomoles per liter to 12.8 nanomoles per liter after reintroducing the turkesterone and the ecdysterone. So now this experiment has finally concluded. I can safely say that both turkesterone and ecdysterone, or at least in combination, are able to somewhat sustain SHBG levels. Again, going from 10.4 to 12.8 nanomoles per liter is a significant increase of 23%. How much of a difference that will make on your cycle, I'm not entirely sure. I did not notice a difference removing the turkesterone and ecdysterone, and I did not notice a difference reintroducing the turkesterone and ecdysterone. Take that with a grain of salt. This is just purely anecdotal evidence from myself. Nobody else has finished this experiment with me. I have not received any blood work from the audience regarding using turkesterone and ecdysterone on cycle and then removing that and reintroducing this. So this is just evidence from yours truly. I will continue with the turkesterone and ecdysterone until the bottle runs out, and then see if I get additional benefits. Again, I don't expect so much out of turkesterone and ecdysterone when I'm already running 500 milligrams of steroids per week and growth hormone and insulin and, well, the mitochondrial support stack. Right? There's a lot of things that goes into this cycle. Still, it's good to see that my hypothesis of these compounds being able to sustain or raise SHBG levels somewhat while using anabolic androgenic steroids was proven with my blood work. But I would like to see your guys' blood work if you were to do a similar experiment. Again, you have to make sure that all of the variables stay very, very similar, because thyroid medication and estradiol and SERMs are known to increase SHBG levels, and anabolic steroids, growth hormone, insulin, and a couple other compounds are known to suppress SHBG. So if you were to do an experiment like this, make sure that everything stays consistent, and then you can draw your own conclusion. And once those bottles finish, I will leave the turkesterone and ecdysterone out of my protocol, because I don't think that they can sustain my SHBG levels when I'm increasing my anabolic androgenic steroid intake going forward. For the guys that are using TRT and have chronically low SHBG levels because you do daily microadministrations, or you're using growth hormone and insulin on top of that as some sort of TRT plus protocol, when you have chronically low SHBG levels, I think that turkesterone and ecdysterone can sustain them somewhat, preventing you from getting into that slump of poor libido or poor anabolism. So keep that in mind. It's a consideration. If it's worth the price, I'm not entirely sure. That's something for you to decide, because again, adding these compounds on top of your PED stack just to raise SHBG levels a little bit, I can't really say if that's worth the cost or not. I'll leave that up to you. So since I'm going to be turning 39 at the end of September, I decided to give this cycle another 8 weeks. I'm going to increase the dose. Actually, I'm going to double the dose of anabolic androgenic steroids, considering that most of my blood work parameters are actually quite good. And the only thing that is actually worrying are my cardiac markers, which again, I'm not entirely sure what's causing it, but I will figure it out over the next couple of weeks, making small adjustments as I go along and retest these markers. I've decided to increase my Bayer testoviron from half an ampule per week to 3/4 of an ampule, raising it from 156 to about 234 milligrams per week. I'm going to go from 2 ampules of Bayer Rimobolan to 3 ampules Bayer Rimobolan, so that's about 375 milligrams Primobolan per week. Again, Bayer testoviron and Bayer Rimobolan are generally overfilled, so I would get about 1.2, 1.25 milliliters from every single ampule. So I'm going to go with a 1 milliliter concentration dose. If I get more milliliters out of an ampule, I'm going to go with the amount that actually each ampule contains. 3/4 of a Bayer testoviron ampule actually contains 234 milligrams testosterone enanthate. And an ampule of Bayer Rimobolan contains 125 milligrams methanolone enanthate. I'm going to switch to homebrew nandrolone decanoate, increase from 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams per week. So that's 0.4 milliliters on a concentration of 250 milligrams per 1 milliliter brewed in grapeseed oil. I'm getting good results from 50 milligrams nandrolone decanoate. I don't feel too puffy, too water retentive. In the beginning, I did feel that, but now that I'm leaner, my water retention is actually quite manageable. So I feel I have a little bit of wiggle room there. And since my knees and joints there are now, let's say 90%. Previously, they were about 40%. And I think part of the reason why my knees got that bad was due to the full range of motion that I was doing on all of the exercises. Part of the reason was the buildup of scar tissue in my glutes due to repetitive glute administrations intramuscularly. So now after weeks and weeks and weeks of additional deep tissue massage therapy on my upper glutes and my IT band, my outer quad, that has all been loosened up significantly, improving the range of motion and the pressure that I feel in my knees, which is now getting less and less and less. Of course, the nandrolone is contributing to that, and the overall performance-enhancing drug stack that I've been running. So I think that a slight bump in nandrolone decanoate from 50 to 100 milligrams will improve my knees even further. I'm going to keep my range of motion on the leg presses a little bit more limited compared to before, so no more knees to chest. I'm really going to focus on my quads and use the reverse resistance bands to take some of the pressure off the bottom of particular lifts. I've stopped doing leg extensions. I'm doing a little bit more mobility work. Again, I'm staying on top of my deep tissue massage therapy. All of the scar tissue in my upper glutes have now pretty much disappeared. I've gone through a lot of pain over the last couple of weeks. And the IT band in my outer quads are now loosened up significantly to the point my range of motion is a lot better, even though I'm actively limiting the range of motion on my leg days. So my knees, hopefully, fingers crossed, over the next 8 weeks or so will go from 90% to 100% again. And then I can actually load up some serious weights and maybe improve my legs to their former glory. Because again, my legs are kind of lacking. And that's something I would still like to improve, even though it's probably not going to happen pushing close to 40. On top of that, I will add in drostanolone enanthate, also homebrew, 250 milligrams per 1 milliliter produced in grapeseed oil. So that's 0.8 milliliters or 200 milligrams drostanolone enanthate spaced out over daily microadministrations. I'm going to mix all of this into a single insulin syringe with daily shots. Again, I will pre-mix this into a sterile vial, get my week's supply of testosterone, primabol and nandrolone, and masterone in a single vial, and then draw what I need with a 3 milliliter syringe, and then backfill an insulin syringe and inject that subcutaneously, nice and slowly. Because the testosterone and the nandrolone is going up, but the primobolan is also going up, and the masterone is coming in, I don't expect too many changes to my serum estradiol levels. Now again, right now we're around 30 picograms per milliliter. That might come up depending on the testosterone and the nandrolone increases. But again, the primobolan and the masterone might suppress that further. I will also add in the ACG, which is further down this protocol, so that might increase my testosterone and estradiol concentrations further. So since there's so many variables, the only thing I can really do is keep track of my blood work and recheck my estradiol levels 2 weeks from now, and again 4 weeks from now to see if I need to make further adjustments. I will increase my diroloxin, oxandrolone from Iran hormone, from 5 milligrams per day to 10 milligrams per day. And tentatively, I found an underground lab anadrol somewhere in my steroid drawer, which is like expired for 5 years already. I haven't really touched anadrol for the last couple of years. So I found a bottle of expired anadrol, and I might take 50 milligrams sublingually on quad day. Again, I want to improve my quads, and quads is always a struggle to improve. So since all the dosages are going up, might as well sprinkle in the anadrol, like I mentioned in that pre-workouts super pump stack previously. Again, it's a little bit tentative. I might think about it maybe once in a while. I throw in a little bit of anadrol if I'm in a good mood. Of course, I will remove the oxandrolone on that day, right? Limit it to 1 oral only. So instead of 10 milligrams Anavar pre-workout, I might take 50 milligrams anadrol pre-workout. All of that in combination, that's a total injection volume of 5.9 milliliters per week, or 0.84 milliliters per day. So that's almost a full insulin syringe. I've already done most of these injections subcutaneously, and actually it holds quite well. So previously I would do 0.5 milliliters sub-Q, and now I've gone up to 0.84 milliliters sub-Q, and I honestly don't notice a difference. So maybe you can even go as high as 1 milliliter subcutaneously. Still, this is the highest I've gone up to so far, so don't take my word for it. If I were ever to go to 1 milliliter subcutaneous, I will keep you guys posted on whether that's a good idea or not. The total anabolic androgenic steroid intake per week is around, if I add in the anadrol, 1,020 milligrams per week. So that's going to be between 140 to 180 milligrams steroids per day. depending on which day I take the Anadrol, which I'm going to limit to once a week, if that. So I'm basically doubling the dose from, let's say, 493 milligrams to 1020 milligrams per week. A significant increase, but it's only going to be for 8 weeks, after which I will cruise again, because now that I'm getting close to my birthday, I have a little bit of a goal to look my best shape I can be at 39. I don't think I'll break my previous best shape from a couple years ago. If I can get close to that shape, I'll be very, very happy. Take my progress pictures and then clean out, go on a cruise for a couple weeks or months until I maybe go back on a blast or a cycle at the end of the year. DHEA will stay around 37.5 milligrams. Pregnenolone will stay at 12.5 milligrams per day. I will continue with 150 milligrams Turkesterone and 150 milligrams Ecdysterone per day until the bottle runs out. Now, regarding the peptides, I've decided to reintroduce the ACG going forward. And even though my anabolic androgenic steroid intake is basically doubling from 500 to 1,000 milligrams per week, I will start to use ACG again to restore testicular functioning somewhat. I'm not entirely sure how much testicular functioning I'll be able to restore with this much anabolic steroid in the picture. Again, I've always said that ACG will work up until a certain dose of anabolic steroids, after which it will probably be counterproductive to take it because you just get additional estrogen. Now, based on my previous blood work results, my estrogen has some room to be increased. And because I've been off ACG without testicular functioning for months now, again, I had fake ACG in the past, I feel that it's a good time to introduce ACG again because my cycle is going to last for another 8 weeks or so. I will use 500 IUs ACG Monday, Wednesday, Friday until I feel that testicular volume has returned to a certain extent, after which I will reduce the dose to 250 IUs 3 times per week to sustain testicular functioning. So first I have to recover it, then I just have to sustain it with a lower dose. Whether 250 IUs ACG will be sufficient on a dose of 1,000 milligrams steroids per week, that remains to be seen. Again, I will do my blood work and that obscure method, dipping my nuts in a cup of water, measuring the water displacement that will occur. Right now we're kind of low, but hopefully I can bring that back up to 80 milliliters of water displacement, reintroducing the ACG. I've stocked up on a lot of IPSA, Pregnil. I will no longer be using the MSD Pregnil, which I used in the past. So I've got IPSA, Pregnil, I've got Ovitril, I've got HMG. That's all stocked up because I do want to plan for kids somewhere next year. Again, this is probably going to be my last cycle for a while. So I want to restore testicular functioning for at least 6 months leading into coming off cycle and then continuing with testicular functioning to start making babies with my wife. So this is just a prequel, so to say, and hopefully that will improve my testicular functioning and semen parameters going forward. Norditropin, growth hormone, I will increase from 2 to 2.4 IUs before bed. So far, so good. I think I have a little bit of wiggle room there. The Sazenda liraglutide, which I introduced 2 weeks ago, will continue at 0.6 milligrams subcutaneously Monday to Saturday. Lantus, upon waking, 10 IUs, that doesn't change. I will continue with 2 IUs Humalog pre-fasted cardio. That works very, very well for fat loss and to keep my legs somewhat full while doing 30 minutes of moderate to high intensity elliptical work. 5 IUs Humalog before chest, quad, shoulder, and hamstring days. That is working very, very well. It worked better with the injectable ATP. But again, we're going to leave that out until I have a better grasp on my inflammatory markers. I will reintroduce the MOD-C, albeit on Sunday and Wednesday. On Wednesday, I'm always a little bit tired because Tuesday is leg day. And I usually do hamstrings and calves on Friday or Saturday. So Sunday and Wednesday, I'm usually a little bit fatigued. So instead of using the MOD-C on Monday and Friday, now I'm going to switch to Sunday and Wednesday. So those days I feel a little bit more energetic. 5 milligrams intramuscularly, spaced out over 2 shots of 2.5 milligrams. And so far I've done that twice now, last Sunday and last Wednesday being yesterday. And I have no post-injection pain or any of the discomfort that I had with the subcutaneous MOD-C administrations, which I did previously. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this will keep my inflammatory markers down if that was the root cause of why my CRP levels were elevated previously. I will discontinue the NAD+, like I mentioned before, but the antioxidant stack of glutathione, vitamin C, and B100 complex will continue on a weekly basis with IV administrations. I will continue with the 250 to 500 milligrams nicotinamide mononucleotides. Modafinil will stay the same, T3 will stay the same, but I will add in T4 at 50 micrograms per day. So that's 12.5 micrograms T3 and 25 micrograms T4 in the morning and again sometime in the afternoon. I will not introduce the GC1 soboterone just quite yet. Again, I want to get a firm grasp on my cardiac markers and see why they're elevated or increasing over time. I will keep the ribulsine in at 3 milligrams upon waking before fasted cardio, but I will discontinue 20 micrograms clenbuterol. The injectable L-carnitine will stay in at 500 milligrams pre-cardio or pre-workout. Ancillaries will stay the same, 5 milligrams nebivolol, 10 milligrams ezetimibe, and 40 milligrams telmisartan. And that pretty much covers the entire adjustments that I need to make. Again, I will do blood work in 2 weeks or so, then decide which adjustments I need to make going forward. Hopefully, this new homebrew in grapeseed oil will keep my inflammatory markers down, as well as the intramuscular MOD-C administrations. Until I have a better grasp on my inflammatory markers and my cardiac markers, I will leave the injectable ATP and AMP carnitine formula out and not switch to the GC1 soboterone just quite yet. And I think that pretty much covers it. Again, this video is probably way too long. But you guys know me, I'm thorough, I'm in depth. I want to go over all of the details, all the potential options, all the small nuances which could potentially affect your blood work, especially with, well, this bolus amounts of various performance-enhancing drugs which all have drug interactions, right, regarding your lipids or your liver panel, your hematocrit, etc. So I want to be as thorough as possible explaining my blood work results to you guys. Hopefully you find it informative. If you didn't hit that like button, now is a good time to do so. Helps with the algorithm. If you're not subscribed, now is also a good time to do so. Helps with the growth of this channel. We're now at 60,000 subs, which is small compared to the bigger channels. But again, you put 60,000 people in a room, and that's a lot of handshakes that I need to do. So thank you guys so much for joining me on this journey. If you think I'm crazy for doing all this shit to my body, let me know down below in the comment section. I would love to hear your opinion. Some of you guys showed your concern regarding the clenbuterol. So you guys won. The clenbuterol right now is going to be discontinued. And besides that, I think most of you guys are actually quite excited on the changes that I've made, judging by the direct messages and all of the positive comments I've had on my Instagram page and the previous videos. Anyway, I'll leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Have a look at some of my sponsors and affiliates. Use those discount codes. Save yourself some money while shopping online. So be sure to get yourself a discount and set some money aside for blood work. Because blood work, well, in most cases, there's no discount for it unless you get it for free through your healthcare and insurance. I pay it out of pocket. So every discount I can get, I take and save that for blood work and organ imaging, which I do extensively. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.